Yeah, thank you very much to all contributions. Very impressive, very concise. Don't try to summarize all the 4 presentations. I just want to try to make the bridges between them and then leave more time for discussion. In my view, Carlos was elaborating the implications of Newtonian mechanistic worldview and how we need other kinds of knowledge for real change, that we cannot stay with the same kinds of doing things as we did so far. And as Nick was illustrating and giving examples how we have to change the way of teaching in schools and elsewhere with examples, with engagement and so on, and also changing the bodies of knowledge we are transmitting to younger generations. Howard Blumenthal, in fact, was showing us something similar that was mentioned by Fatwa before, that how much young kids, young people, children are caring for the family, for their friends, for themselves, and what they know, but we don't help them to improve or to change. This will be also a topic later today, a topic that has been raised in our survey, that young people, when they arrive at university, they're enthusiastic, they want to know about sustainability issues and engage, and then they are confronted with the disciplinary frameworks of silos, and they are losing all enthusiasm for engaging. And the last presentation by Branko Šmon was, in my view, a fantastic example how to illustrate what we want to do with strong pictures and overcoming problems of language, maybe, by a symbolic way to approach sustainability issues and motivate people also by visualization to engage in these issues for the longer period of their life. So I would leave the floor to you, maybe from my colleagues next to me, first statements or comments, and then the people remotely going into deeper of their topic during the discussion.
Well, I mean, it's...
Helmut, please.
Yeah, I found these also very inspiring and impressive contributions, and I think they have a lot to what they have in common, and what is very important is somehow to connect the head and the heart, right? I mean, because of the affective dimension somehow seems to be very open and very close to the environmental concerns and sustainability, and on somehow the cognitive level also we have all the insight and the knowledge we need to change our lives. But the question is exactly, I mean, somehow there seems to be this big split, which you always observe. For example, nobody wants war, but still we have war, right? And everybody wants to save the planet. Everybody wants to save the planet, but we don't do it. And everyone wants social justice. The heart is very clear, right? And the head is very clear there too, but we don't act in this way. So somehow, I mean, maybe it's not, I really wonder how we finally make the transitions, right? And maybe it's not even it's not the transition between the head and the heart. It's the transition between the head, the heart, and the action. So I think the great question is, why are our actions, our institutions so completely immune against our insights and against our affects? And I think we haven't really solved that problem, but I'm not sure whether anyone has a good solution to this.
Well, Thomas, please.
Yeah, I think in the long run, it's perhaps, you know, we're told we may have only 10 years to make a massive change, particularly in relation to climate change. But perhaps we also need to take a long-term perspective, and working with young people is very important. Many of us are educators. We do have a special role in mobilizing the enthusiasm and the sort of commitment of young people to ideals, a typical commitment to ideals. We have to mobilize and we have to inform young people and empower them And one thing we did last year at the World Academy with some young junior fellows of the Academy organized a global youth leaders meeting online, of course, because of COVID. And we were bringing young leaders together to exchange their views, to liaise with scientists, with the scientific community. Those kinds of bridges are very important.
Martin Leiner, also a short comment.
Yes, I see also in all these approaches the question for ethics, for talking about ethical questions, about also spirituality and such issues which often are also a bit at the limit of our scientific world. Religions as well. Well, some people bring them in, but there should be also this enormous development of a spirituality related to sustainability, to ecology, in different religions as well, which should become also more and more a partner of our discussions.
Okay. Yeah. Is somebody from the presenters responding to, reacting to these comments before we then enter to the questions in the chat?
Yes, I wouldn't mind reacting. I would like to. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I would like to go back to what Hartmut Rosa said. It's not just about the head and the heart, but also about actions. It's what I called learning with the hands, but also, and what Mr. Leiner said, it made me think of Kant. What can I know? What should I do? And what can I hope? And that's why I think hope is really a crucial dimension in education, because I see that young people are so anxious about this uncertain future that a lot of them remain in a phase of denial. They focus on the here and now and on what is close to them, and so creating a context where that gives them hope by focusing on the emerging initiatives where people are rebuilding the world, not with a private profit aim, but with, community aimed and restoring nature, hearing stories about communities that do it very differently, that have no private property but common goods. And they told me, and I'm running pilot project in that, and the students told me, this has changed our life. We have hope again. The future is not written. We can write it. And sure, knowledge has, science has a place in that. But science, as Louis said, the institutions of the past or the knowledge of the past does not create a future. Learning is not transmission of knowledge. It's creating new knowledge. And that knowledge should allow us to emancipate ourselves and to survive, give young people a future again. So that's where I think I totally agree with what was said, and it is really what we're trying to experiment now in also with the European project.
Mm-hmm. Maybe Carlos, also a comment on the comments?
Microphone.
Carlos, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted, sorry. No, I want to come back to this very important point that Hartmut made about the immunity of our institutions to what we cherish the most. And I think this is a fundamental observation. And of course, something that we have to change, Where does this come from? I think that from the fact that the institutions we have were not designed with whatever meaning you give to the word design, with as a central hypothesis that life is interdependencies. They do not address, they are not built to take into account interdependencies. So I would follow Gregory Bateson when he said, the main problems we have come from the differences between the way we think and the way nature works. And our conscious purpose is very much biased towards not looking at interdependencies. And this is a key issue, because this creates constantly blind spots. But fortunately, and this is the hope, fortunately, we are capable of being aware that we have blind spots. So we have blind spots, but we can know that we have blind spots. Maybe cannot know all of them. And looking at that and changing again the epistemology, if you look at institutions, they are all based, and when I say institutions, I'm including here corporations, private and public institutions, institutions in academia, etc. They are built around the concept of separation, of separating, not of taking into account relationships and interdependencies, but rather of based on the idea of cutting things to separate them. And this idea of separating, of course, is very useful for certain matters, but it ultimately creates a fantasy of exclusion, which is the idea that I don't have to care about what happens to somebody else than myself. So separation is central to the epistemology of our institutions, instead of relationships and interdependencies. And this is the big topic I think we have to address.
Thank you, Carlos. Maybe Fatwa, would you like to comment on the presentation of Howard Blumenthal, the collection of how he's seeing all these young kids and their aspirations and hopes for the future? Could you put your microphone on, Fatwa? We can't hear you.
Unmute.
Okay.
It's an important component of society that is not taken in consideration in our knowledge, and so we have to pay attention to the children. I remember a book some time ago called "The Scientist in the Crib," and how children, even in the crib, are beginning to explore. And then the mother comes, if a child tries to hold water as the mother is washing him, he is being a scientist, actually. And the mother would say, "Stop it, I have no time, just come on, don't play." That kills it. And I think that science and knowledge develops in children and local people that we ignore as part of our knowledge that will help us build solutions on the ground to problems. And that means that we really have to look at science a little differently from the way this panel is looking at it. That is, science is very significant, and natural science has to be integrated in our knowledge. And the past is very important. What we know about COVID today builds, World Health Organization builds on the Spanish flu information, on Ebola, and other things that happened a few years ago in SARS. This is the past. It's an immediate past, but it helps us build the future. So these dichotomies and the mentality of a clash of polarities, I think we should transcend.
Thank you very much. I'm speaking now to Branko Zmon in German. I will ask him his experiences with his project in Zermatt about the project we just had in the illustration. Herr Zmon, vielen Dank dass Sie da sind und Ihre Präsentation. Ich möchte Sie fragen, was Ihre Erfahrungen waren mit dem Projekt in Zermatt und wie es gelang, mit dieser Visualisierung Leute zu mobilisieren, zu sensibilisieren und zu mobilisieren.
I would like to talk in English, yes.
Okay.
So I'm coming back to the children. When I was then working at the Matterhorn, standing there and also talking to the tourists, so there was a child standing beside me. He was maybe about 10 years old, and I was asking me, what do you think about my project? And he said to me, that's unbelievable. You show us something we didn't have a picture till now. And you have this, and you're showing others in this extension of the Matterhorn. So I was so proud that this small boy he was saying this, and that I am open the eyes for the landscape, for the problem, and with the Matterhorn. So the art for me it's a mind opener. It opens a vision. It opens something that the people didn't understand before. So that's why also in this combination with the landscape, nature, landscape, human, and plastic. So that's why we have to open the eyes, the society, and like Anne said, we have to teach the people, we have to teach the children and open it. And so I think the art can make like like a mind opener for the society and make all these pictures to show the problems and that the people are getting then aware what we should change then in the future.
Thank you very much, and I apologize that I was formulating my questions first in German. I was thinking that you prefer that to do in German. I'm sorry. It was
Yes,
wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hartmut, you want to ask directly a question to Mr. Smon?
Or maybe, yes, or I have an observation. I think what you do is very important, and I agree that this visualization can be very strong, but I think it's not telling people something they did not know, because we know it. You know, we read the numbers and we are told plastic is a huge problem. I think what it does is really giving what I would like to call resonance, right? All of a sudden it resonates with them, right? You need, I mean, this is, I think, maybe something for all, what we've heard all through the panel. I think people do not learn through arguments. This we know very well from cognitive psychology, right? Hardly anyone changes his or her behavior through arguments. You change it when there's a moment of resonance. All of a sudden you feel, oh, this is addressing me, this is speaking to me. It was what Fatwa told us, you know, that people care for the dying grandmother, for example, because that resonates with our experience. So I think when we want to really to create a change, it doesn't go through arguments and numbers and figures and theories. It goes through experiences of resonance, really.
Thomas?
Yes, if I may, I wanted to...
No, sorry. Let's answer just Mr. Branko Smon, please.
No, that was Carlos, I think.
You're talking about the resonance. Yeah, that's so important because till now we didn't have a picture for such an amount of the plastic. So that's why I was trying to create this picture so that you can imagine how much is the mass. So if you're talking about this, so we have only these numbers, and the number is very abstract. So we have like 7 billion of tons like last year, and without the change at 2035, it's going to be 16 billion of tons. But you cannot have imagination for a mass, but for a volume. That's why the Matterhorn is showing you the volume. And if you're standing then with this combination with the Matterhorn and the landscape, you have the feeling here, and you cannot say, I am not touched with this. So I think we need pictures to understand something, not only numbers and knowledge. Everybody knows this, and we have only these pictures from the oceans with all the waste swimming there. But I think also a kind of beauty can change the people in the combination with like a mountain with a Matterhorn, because Matterhorn is one of the famous mountains in the world. And I think then you can then see this problem better than in a combination with the picture, with a direct combination with the landscape, with the Matterhorn, and the problem. And then you can think about this and say, I can change this.
I think it's a very important point that also the aesthetics in general is certainly an important dimension of how people understand interconnections and maybe can be what Hartmut calls have a resonance without abstract arguments. So it's the implementation of arguments in something visual, at something that can be experienced emotionally, that can experience aesthetically, and so on. So I think that's an extremely important dimension. If I saw correctly, Carlos was raising his hand, right? Carlos, go ahead.
You were correct. Yes, I wanted to react and elaborate a little bit more on what Fadwa said. I agree that this is not about the discussions we are having are not about the polarity between natural and social sciences and humanities. I would argue that we are more talking about sort of new synthesis, and which is a completely different type of exercise than the analytical focus on smaller and smaller objects that our disciplines are engaged into typically. So it's more about how do we transcend this split between disciplines and work on new kinds of synthesis, knowing that, by the way, as was just said by Beno, most of our intelligence and mind and knowledge are actually unconscious. This is why art is so important. There are other languages than the verbal and mathematical language. There are languages of dance, of painting, and so on, which engage the totality of our experience beyond consciousness. But referring to our relationship with the past, I like very much a quote by William Faulkner, who said once, past is never dead, it's not even past. So the past is absolutely present, not necessarily for good reasons, because it can prevent, and it actually prevents new learning. The example of COVID is not a good example because, in my view, because if you read the reports by the WHO on the SARS pandemic, on the SARS epidemic, one of the things which is said is, we realize that the techniques of the 19th century were more useful to deal with this than the science of 21st. So science of 21st century is not being able, and I think there is an epistemological issue here again, to understand, because we are not able to frame in a proper way our relationship with viruses, which are the basic pieces of the primeval soup from which we come. But also another concrete domain, which has been addressed now in this discussion about kids, education, etc. I would say, there are some worrying questions about our relationship with the past in the way we conceive education. The new ideas on pedagogy are at least 7 decades old, and some of them one century old. Maria Montessori, Lev Vygotsky, these people lived in the beginning of the 20th century. Loris Malaguzzi, who created the Reggio Emilia system, lived in the middle of the 20th century, and we have not been able to learn what they explored to transform our educational system into one in which I think there is a fundamental shift to achieve, which is, and this is very provocative again, which is start from the taking for granted that kids are natural systems thinkers. Okay. Loris Malaguzzi said kids come with 100 languages. We all humans are natural systems thinkers. We don't have to go to a master on systems thinking and complexity to a university to become a system thinker. We have to liberate ourselves from the dominance of this mechanistic framework, which is basically ignoring relationships and interdependencies. And kids have not learned that framework before going to, let's say, ordinary school. And this is why they are natural systems thinkers.
Okay. Thank you very much. You're, Thomas, directly
Yes,
to this point?
directly to this point, and also back to what Martin said earlier about values and ethics. As social scientists, we should understand history. We should understand, in particular, the project of modernity and how it unfolded from the early part of the Enlightenment, the 19th century, or earlier, even earlier science, the beginnings of science as a quest for truth, a quest that mobilized people, that created immense change and enthusiasm, and very spirited. And then the process whereby this project of modernity became instrumentalized. You know, if you look at the work of Horkheimer and Adorno, Weber and others, and we can see that the heart has fallen out of it. It's like, the charisma has been lost in Weber's terminology. The charisma is lost, the shell is still there, but at the heart there's a spiritual poverty, a lack of spirit. And I remind that, the idea of anthropos, in the early Enlightenment thinking, it was a universal spirit. There's a commitment to, a very deep commitment to truth and to inner growth, not just using science as an instrument of power, an instrument for the domination of nature. And they were correctives. For example, the Romantic movement was one of the early reminders that, no, this is going the wrong way. You're losing the heart of the whole project. And that's, I think, where we need that's a civilizational malaise what we are suffering now are the consequences of that. And we need to, we cannot inspire children if we can't give them something to believe in. And science has become this sort of real downer, We are only the descendants of apes, We only consist of atoms swirling around. But that's wrong. Really, if you look at the discoveries of science, it should fill us with wonder, with awe. It should inspire us. It should remind us how much we are a part of a greater whole, of the web of life, how we're related to every living sentient being on this planet, and I mean scientifically proven to be totally connected and interconnected at any moment. Okay, those are scientific facts, if you wish, but they are also important truth that can inspire us to take the role of custodians of nature and not condemning the fact that because our natural condition means that we are mortal, that we should use this short time to maximize our own short-term pleasures and desires for grandeur to cover that fact. And we should take comfort in the fact that we come from this great whole and we return to it. So we need to, somewhere there, to give a new interpretation of the discoveries of science that gives people some kind of a spiritual foundation that around which they can reorder their sense of their place in the cosmos and our role as human beings.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you like to respond to that, Martin, before we go to the questions from the chat then?
Yeah, I think this is a good example that we can bring new things in, this interconnectedness proven by science, but we have also to connect with the already existing institutions, with religions around the world, which people are believing in. And they also did a quite good job especially with this problem of reconciling with the limits of our life, that we are mortal, that we have to learn to be finite, or limits of our knowledge, that to accept this a bit in a belief and a trust and everything, and to connect those better together. Of course, there's a deep problem in religions with a lot of violent traditions and a lot of oppressive traditions, and But this is the same case for all institutions. And therefore, I think they do not function so much. They did not work through that economy is linked to slavery and state is linked to violence and arms. And this is still very much alive in all institutions. Even marriage comes from an institution of owning another person. At least during a certain time, it was conceived like this.
Yeah, okay. So, I think one point I would like to emphasize of this discussion is that it started from a point that we also need to listen to how people experience their lives in their places where they are living with their cultural heritage, with their cultural, and that's meaning, Fedor Pille said, according to Carlos, that we have 2 ears and only 1 mouth. Maybe you should start to listen more before speaking. So I think that could be also a good device for how the humanities and the social sciences can engage in the sustainability debate and help people to improve their living conditions. But now I would like to go to the chat, and there is a question or a comment from Enviro Heritage. They say that's a very interesting debate that we are having here. The humanities and the social sciences are places where humans' needs can be explored and addressed as such are very key to the achievement of the SDGs. Is somebody who wants to comment on that? Maybe Anne. It's also addressing the educational side.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the comment also, because it links again the question with how do we define human needs? Is it for science to decide that? Can science make sense of life, as Sheila Yazanov stated? Or is this an ethical question that is primordial, listening to the planet, listening to life, respecting life? That is not a question of knowing. Well, it is a question that if we don't do that, we will die. But it's also a question of being connected and resonating with the nature around you. That when the COVID came, we saw the blue sky again. It was people saw the mountains again. It was reconnecting in a certain sense. So I think it is really important that indeed we unravel those Gordian knots, as I called it, of how did we get so estranged from that deep connection with nature. And I think that also resonates with what Hartmut Rosa just said, that the heart fell out of the modernity. And from the literature that I read, it goes back even much further before to very ancient times, where the Indo-European cultures were very patriarchal cultures that says, humans are created in the image of God and we are above nature, and God has given us nature to own and to change and to manipulate and to extract. And I think in many of our institutions and discourses, it is, even in science, it is very, very, very deeply embedded that we are above nature. We are the subject and nature is the object. Mm-hmm. And I think, and we have the right, it is human progress to manipulate nature to fulfill our needs. We always think in this opposition between man, and even if you talk about, human centrism, we use nature for our personal needs and it might kill us, because nature is not designed for our needs. It has its own dynamics. And then if you say, let's go to ecocentrism, then people immediately think that you're saying, oh, so nature is more important than humans. But we are nature. So this dichotomy thinking is, I think it's also the way we are wired in our brain, these automatic reflexes to say, we need to listen to people bottom up. Oh, you're against top down? No, it might be and a very complex dynamics. So that is very difficult. And that relates, I think, to the SDG question, because the way we are wired, we want linear, direct pathways to solution. The easiest is to take as Carlos was saying, take the SDGs like a choice menu. And then I can say, I have an action here and it's good for SDG 3, 5, and 8. And of course, it doesn't work like that, but it does work if you say the SDGs are a global agenda and we can only achieve, the social goals like hunger, equality, education, etc. if at the same time we also achieve the planetary goals like life on land and life in sea and stable climate, because otherwise we're not educating our children for the long term. And that will require that we redesign fundamentally what is economics, what are cities like, how are they organized like, what is innovation like, because what it now does is extract the planet for the needs that we, from our ancient Western philosophy, we are above nature, to re-embed our institutions, our money system, our educational system, into a way that helps us to find happiness and find fulfillment in those things like community, connection with nature, resonance, which will also restore the planet. So that is where I use the SDGs a lot as a leverage, but always with the warning. It only works if you conceive them not as a list of separate aims or goals or targets, but as a global agenda of interconnected things. And yes, they are of different orders, but the heart of it may be SDG 4. We have to unlearn this old narrative that we're disconnected from nature and relearn to find happiness in nature.
Okay. I can just maybe tell a little anecdote in that respect. When I was presenting the program of the International Year of Global Understanding in 2010 in Nagoya to the common meeting, the first common meeting of the International Social Science Council and CIPSH, the International Council for Philosophy and Human Sciences, after my presentation, Juan Cieli, the Nobel Prize laureate in chemistry, was jumping up and said, "Oh, I really like your talk, but what is about nature?" And I said, "Here is nature, our body. We are part of nature." And I think this is a very important starting point. Juan Cieli was later on one of the key drivers to preparing the merger of the social sciences and the natural science that was taken on later on by Gordon McBain and was implemented in 2017, if I remember correctly. So you can see how long institutional changes take, but sometimes one little point can have a big effect if the agent has the power of transformation. Of course, not everybody can transform everything to any minute everywhere in the world, but a little bit everybody every day. Would like somebody to comment on what Anne just said, because we have another question from the chat. Yes, Carlos and then Branko. Yes, Carlos first.
On the needs, of course, this question of the needs, the human needs, is central, and at the same time completely tricky, because there is no way to define that. There is no way to define human needs. This pertains to a domain of concepts which are beyond, as Ilya Prigozhin said, again, reality is richer than what we can describe in any language, So most of important things in life are actually impredicative. We cannot define them without referring to themselves. Think of love, think of friendship, think of beauty, think of life itself. We cannot define life. So it's not something on which we can take an objective position as an outsider observer. But of course, this makes the topic all more exciting, and I would say we have to explore that. What is the response to what we need? Mobilizing all our capacities, the conscious and the unconscious, meaning our capacities of artistic expression, to go beyond, schemes which are, in my view, very unsatisfactory, because the standard answer to the question on human needs would be to refer to the Maslow pyramid, which is so widely used, and this is completely unsatisfactory in my view. And just to finish, there is this ironic thing that modern science is sometimes or often reaching knowledge or confirming knowledge that we know since the beginning of time, since very long, through other languages. And I'm thinking about this decades-long, almost a century-long project at Harvard of following a quite large number of people over their lifetime, to find out what makes a good life and a healthy life, with a lot of observation, data collection, etc., to reach the following conclusion, which we knew since the very beginning. And the conclusion is, it's the quality of our relationships. So what are the needs of humans? Have good relationships with others and with nature. But we knew that since the beginning of times. I mean, African cultures, indigenous African cultures, which are still alive today, know that, and they have that embedded in one word, Ubuntu. It can describe what we need several sentences to explain in English. Because that core idea that what do we need? Relationships is embedded in those cultures.
Thank you very much. Branko, if possible, not too long, because I want to go to the last question from the chat. Branko? Branko
Switch on
Smon?
your mic. He's muted.
Unmute.
Yes. We need a...
Branko Smon, please.
Who is now talking? I'm talking or not?
You are
Yes.
talking. We can hear you.
No, I'm coming back to the science because, of course, we need the science. Yes, but and also the modern technology. Without the technology and the science, it wouldn't be possible to make this conference. But then, like the future is going to be now, maybe it's still going too much in this digital reality, and also the children today. They are too much involved maybe in this digital reality, and then sometimes they forget that we have this nature really around us. And I think we have also to teach them that they should open the eyes, and there should be a balance between this system, the technology system and the nature. Otherwise, the children are getting lost, and just with these smartphone phones, being in this own world and forgetting that we have this nature out of surrounding us. And think we have to work in this direction and open also the mind that the technologies are very important, but that's not the only way. We have also have to be prepared on this, that maybe the technologies then fail one day, and then we have just to live with our nature. And we have to understand that the planet Earth is something miracle. It's a miracle. That's something unique in the universe. I think that's something unique, and we forget this about maybe too much science. Yes, science that's perfect, but the science didn't find till now another planet in the universe. And we should wonder about the nature, the planet, and live without this. And don't forget that we are, as Anne was talking before, that we are a part of the nature.
Right. Yeah, taking this point again, before I come to the next question from the chat, saying that we are part of nature is also opposed to the idea of ecology, because ecology is always the one species and the surrounding. So it's also making a distance. So if you go to Haeckel and the real deep roots of ecological thinking, you will find out that ecological thinking is probably not a so good solution for sustainability problems as people think so far. Anyway, however, we can come back later to this point. I will point to the question of Janine Bittner. The question is, fundamental question is, what is learning? And how can we succeed in holistically educating responsible global citizens who are able to meet global challenges in close cooperation with society? Who wants to?
I would use my friend Nora Bateson has a very simple way to answer this question, which is to say there is no difference between living and learning. So learning is living, but elaborating a bit more on that. Learning is not about acquiring certain knowledge, formalized knowledge in a conscious way so that you can repeat it in an exercise. It's not about that. It's I think learning is changing the patterns of your behavior. It's calibrating, is changing the way you interact with your environment, within the relationships with others and with nature, and changing, embodying also new patterns.
Yeah.
Anne, please.
Yes, I agree with what Carlos, his definition of what is learning, and it also implies a lot of unlearning of all the patterns and the habits and the language and that we think is normal. And we have to unlearn that to reconnect with nature. And just to if you're asking how, I can give you a very concrete example of how I'm running a pilot project on that, and I can just tell you in 3 sentences how we did it. We're not battling any curriculum battles. We just create a small program. It's extracurricular. It's a honors program. They get 6 ECTS points for it. And what we do is reading about autocatalysis, Prigozhin, ecology, how co-evolution between man and human. They need to have that new vocabulary, circular causality, systems thinking, exercises in systems thinking. And then the real educational challenge, they don't get an exam about all this. We're not testing their knowledge, but they have to write a chapter of what we call the young person's guide to the future. And it's conceived like a travel guide, like you can have the Lonely Planet Guide to Mongolia. It's in chapters. How do you eat there? How do you pay there? How do you move around there? So they have to explore that. How could it be in the future? But it's not a science fiction or a fantasy or a dream, like we find some magical thing in space or whatever. They have to go look at places where the future is emerging, and future is then everything that steps out of the extractive economic system and reconnects people with, redesigns economic transactions to serve the community, reconnect people with each other and with nature. So it's outside of the auditorium. We leave the university. We go to places where the future is emerging, like community-supported agriculture, zero waste shops, etc. And then the students have to also analyze, how with data, with scientific information, why that would be more future-proof than anything else. So we're not letting them say what will the future look like, because that depends on human choices. We're not asking them to say what should the future look like, because it's not up to scientists to define that for society, but it is what could the future look like. And that, gives them both the insight and the empathy that we're exploiting nature and we are dominating with our worldview other countries and other continents, and people are suffering from that. But then also we can act empowerment. Something is already happening. We can go that pathway if we want to, and then that gives them hope. So that is a very concrete example how it can be done, and I can give more information via other channels if you like.
Thank you very much, Anne. Other comments on the question
I just wanted to say or add on to what Carlos said, because I agree that learning is to be alive. To be alive means to be open to new learning, to new things all the time. That means to be truly alive, because you can be alive and be captivated in a framework of fixed ideas. And I just wanted to add that that's not an accident, because our information processing capacity, our cognitive capacity is limited, and it's not wrong to economize. In fact, it's absolutely essential. That means we don't think about everything from scratch every time we encounter it. We have certain strategies, okay? We move around the house, we know where everything is, we have our maps of things, and that's just an economical way to go about living as well. And it's not sensible to question things that work well, but when they don't work well, and if you have new evidence or contrary experience, then you're called upon, your commitment is called upon, your commitment to truth, and that means learning, opening up and saying, okay, I was wrong, I'm going to change my knowledge, I'm not going to make an identity out of it, but it's changeable, it's open to new evidence. No problem, I know more now than I did yesterday, that's great. But often people have this commitment to these convenient, fixed ideas they have, and they're not willing to relinquish it when it's necessary to do so, when those patterns have outlived their usefulness.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Other comments? We have a couple of minutes left. Fatwa, I see.
I have
Fatwa.
something to say. Can I say something?
Yes, you can go ahead, Fatwa. You are very brave. You are staying up until 1 o'clock in the morning. That's really fantastic.
No, it's 3 o'clock.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much for staying with us.
Okay, yes, I am, an adventurer. Anyway, I want to talk about how I learned about learning, because part of my being invited to Qatar University involved my being also a distinguished professor of anthropology, so I was teaching classes. And what I learned about learning is that I had to unlearn teaching the way I taught for 30 years in the United States, because I was dealing with different people and different culture and different cognitive capacity, not higher or lower, but different, because cognition is influenced by experiences, and experiences influence the cognitive structure of the brain. So your brains become qualitatively different with time because of all the experiences which come from the culture. So I had to unlearn how I teach Qatari students who don't need jobs, who are not in the university for employment. They are in the university for something else. And I had to find out what to do with that, because I was used to an American student who tells me, how can this affect my finding a job? Well, Qataris are born with jobs, and they are a minority, and they are already placed in society, and then they go to the university to enhance their knowledge. And that's a different kind of teaching, where I had to learn fast about the culture and then relate the learning to the culture. When I give a test to an American student about kinship, about family, they are lost. They spend an hour in the test trying to figure out grandfathers, grandmothers, grandfathers. So the whole test would be based on that they really have to learn something about family. In Qatar, I used the same test because I didn't know. I mean, I had to learn first. When I used the same test, they all finished in 2 minutes. And I had an hour to go. And I said, what happened? They said, oh, this is very simple. What you gave us is the case of my aunt and the mother's brother's son's daughter of my grandchild, who is married to the son of the aunt. And they say it so fast. That's a kind of cognition that's based on family. And I said, my test sounded very stupid, because like this, they all walked out after 2 minutes and they got A's. So I think that there was something that I needed to do to enhance and to reach them. So I started trying to relate to them, to convince them that they need some kind of education. And based on their own experiences, because they don't really need an education to get a job. And that is a big challenge. That's why experiences in different cultures are important. and sustainability projects in different cultures are important because we learn from these experiences. So I took a picture of my granddaughter sitting at the computer in Washington, D.C., holding the mouse as a telephone. And somehow her mother took that picture and sent it to me in Qatar. I was very nostalgic, of course, for the family. And I put that slide on. First of all, they have never in Qatar used the visual as part of the teaching. So that was very new. I'm a visual anthropologist, so I thought that. So I put that picture and I told them, okay, we discussed globalization theory, and you are now aware of 5 models, 5 ways of globalization theory as it is in the books. Look at this picture of that little girl and tell me which globalization theory fits here, or what can you tell me about globalization? At the beginning, they thought I must be a nut, because first of all, I'm using a picture, and they said we have never seen a picture in an exam in our lives. I told them, well, it's something new, just do it. and they did it. And after a while, they were writing and writing and writing and writing. I got like 6 pages from each student about it, because the visual enhanced their ability to relate to their world. And suddenly they came up with the conclusion that this little girl who was a 3-year-old sitting at the computer is doing something about technology and so on. And it was marvelous. It was one of the best tests we have done. In other words, we have to learn about learning and learn about teaching.
Good.
Thank you very much, Fatwa. Branko, want to say something very short? We are very close to the time limit. Branko? We can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
Unmute.
Okay. I agree to Fatwa. We need the picture, we need the visualization. Otherwise, without imagination and all these images, we cannot understand our world. And so that's so important that we show these images the children and for the new education. And so that's why I would like to make this with the Matterhorn, that everybody knows that the Matterhorn has this scale now on the world, so that people can directly go to those scale and see that's our image for the amount of plastic. So even the children can see. So that's the size of the Matterhorn. All this plastic amount is inside. And then
Okay.
I would like to say only this one image. And if you're talking about images, so if you're just producing from all this plastic amount on the world, only just bottles, plastic bottles of amount of 1.5 liters, yes, then you can surround the Earth. That's a very big image. Then you can surround the Earth 1.5 billion times underneath. So that's something that's just crazy. And you can bring this to the people only with images. And I think the art is a kind to produce the images. It's a mind opener and make the visualization, because without the visualization, we cannot change our world. Otherwise, it's just been numbers, and we need pictures for education for everybody, even for adults.
Okay. Thank you very much, Branko. This is like some kind of final word, but I would like that we not forget what the other points that have been mentioned, the key points. One is certainly that we are part of nature, and we are not, that nature is not outside of ourselves, but we are part of it. And secondly, that we need to listen more to people we want to work with, not only talking to them, but also listening. Then one point was made that the practical, doing things practically is a wonderful way to learn. We will talk about this this afternoon, about living labs, how important are living labs to learn things. And for me, this and cultural differences, how to accept cultural differences. And I would use this picture of an online conference. As I mentioned this morning, people are watching this in different space-time constellations. Fatwa is 3 o'clock, we are lunchtime, other people are in the morning now, other people are already in the evening. In Delhi, it's probably already after 8 o'clock. So I would say this is a wonderful picture. Despite many spatial temporal differences, we are sharing one moment together when we are talking, despite all differences. And I would find that also as a picture to see all cultural differences rather as a rich part of humanity and not something to fight against out of fear or egocentric attitudes. I think if the humanities and the social sciences can contribute to that insight or to take that serious, this can have major impact of all kinds of policies, including sustainability policies. Thank you very much for watching us, for listening us. Thank you very much for the discussion. Thank you very much for the presentations.